Howdy, Dennis Bradford here. Let's think some about being, feeling, and doing better. Our identity judgments constitute our worlds. We covered that in the previous video. Furthermore, we just start making them. They aren't justified. They don't come about by our following some criteria or rules. If so, they aren't justified or justifiable. There's nothing fixed or absolute about them. Our surrealities are far more common and flexible. After we use identity judgments to simplify the initially confusing and overwhelming chaos of forms, we're able to note relevant similarities and differences to begin to construct our conceptual frameworks. It's important to be clear about this. It's easy to be tempted to think that our surreality, our understanding of the world, is solid and firmly fixed. It's not. As we'll see in coming videos, that's very important to understand. It's also good to understand that our conceptual frameworks are always hierarchical. Why? It leads to an important insight. First, what does it mean for them to be hierarchical? For example, we note the color differences between, say, dark blue objects and light blue objects. Although they are both blue, they are different shades of blue. So, they are both similar and different. In this case, blue is the genus, and the two different shades are species under it. We also note the color differences between, say, blue objects and red objects. Although they are both colored, they are different colors. In this case, color is the genus and red and blue are species under it. We also note that the differently colored objects have different expanses or shapes. Colors and shapes are two different species of the genus quality. Obviously then, the concept of quality is more general than the concept of color. Similarly, the concept of color is more general than that of blue. Similarly, the concept of blue is more general than any of its shades. This explains why our conceptual frameworks are hierarchical. Concepts rank from specific to more general, abstract, fundamental. Fundamental. However, this doesn't mean that abstract concepts or qualities are unreal. Suppose that this shirt is a specific, in terms of hue, saturation, and brightness, shade of blue that we call blue 23. When we look at the shirt, we not only see that it's blue 23, but more generally that it's blue. We also see that it's colored. We also see that it's qualitied. Of course, descriptive words from natural languages, like blue, stand for different qualities. As young children, we absorb the hierarchy that is implicit in whatever natural language is our first. Pointing is not a very effective way of teaching. It typically takes a lot of patience as well as pointing before parents are able to get infants to apprehend even simple concepts or qualities. Once children begin to learn a natural language, though, teaching them becomes easier. What's the important insight about conceptual hierarchies? It's that most people never clarify them at their fundamental level. Unlike what we just did in this video and the last one, they never get clear about primitive identity judgments or about fundamental concepts like that of being an entity or being a quality. The result is predictable. They live life with a conceptual framework that is fundamentally unclear. That basic confusion explains a lot, doesn't it? Permit me to draw your attention to another major problem. Were your parents or caregivers sages? Almost certainly not. According to David R. Hawkins, sages are very uncommon. Statistically, there's less than 1 in 10 million. From The Eye of the Eye. Why is that a problem? It's because infants are innocent in the sense that none of us, as infants, has a criterion for distinguishing between true and false thoughts, hence between true and false beliefs. Nobody is born knowing how to distinguish true propositions from false ones. The result is that we often learn false beliefs, as well as true ones, from our parents and later from other teachers and adults, as well as from siblings and other children. So, not only are normal conceptual frameworks fundamentally confused, but they're also always riddled with counterproductive concepts. They are like overgrown gardens in desperate need of weeding. Even though popularity is not a criterion of truth, it's easy for us as children to absorb whatever beliefs happen to be popular with our parents, families, and cultures. People from the same culture or subculture typically share a lot of beliefs. When those beliefs are perspectively true, that's a source of social stability. It can become a huge problem when the beliefs that we absorb happen to be false. That's how, for example, sexism, racism, xenophobia, and many other malignant beliefs continue to survive generation after generation. Unless a child happens to end up living an examined life like philosophers do, that child has little chance of ever deleting even very toxic beliefs. David R. Hawkins has repeatedly argued in his books that the average advance by a single human being in a lifetime is small. He argues that that can be proven by muscle testing measurements. It's also obvious. How many children have you observed who wind up being significantly wiser than their parents? Sadly, becoming wise is not even a typical aspiration. Except for philosophers, who are few and far between. Who encourages it? Schools typically make things worse. Do you think school teachers want their students questioning everything? Or do you think that school teachers prefer them to be obedient and unquestioning? The purpose of a formal education system is to test for and train students to be productive members of society. Many students wind up as employees. Are employees typically encouraged to question everything? Or are employees valued more when they're obedient and unquestioning? Neither typical parents nor typical school teachers encourage children to wonder, to question, to examine. Children are taught to obey and conform. That's sufficient to explain why social progress is so difficult. Significant individual progress is difficult. It can and does happen, but it doesn't happen easily or naturally. It's not accidental that, say, Christian parents raise children who turn out to be Christians. It's not accidental that, say, parents who believe in democracy tend to produce children who believe in democracy. Very often in our society, adolescents question and rebel against their parents' beliefs. That's fine as far as it goes, but it doesn't usually go far enough. As Mark Twain put it, quote, "When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much he had learned in the 7 years," end quote. Furthermore, even if it were encouraged, thinking well for ourselves isn't easy. It's difficult intellectual work. Realizing that, many people prefer to be told what to think rather than to think for themselves. They simply want to follow, say, tribal, religious, or political leaders. I argue in Mastery in 7 Steps that we are all naturally and rationally lazy, greedy, ambitious, impatient, selfish, vain, and ignorant. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's the starting point. Improvement takes hard work. Why? We all understand the answer. As David R. Hawkins puts it, quote, "Human life is very difficult, even in the best of circumstances," end quote. From The Eye of the Eye. Sages like Hawkins have noted this clearly, at least since the time of the Buddha. In addition to encouraging children to think for themselves and be open-minded, how should we teach them to live in order to help them to become wise and to enjoy life more? We'll turn to that in subsequent videos. Upon examination, it's extremely important to note that the key to living well emotionally is the same as the key to living well. As a hint to what's coming, let me end this video by quoting the Buddha from the Dhammapada Wallace translation. Quote, "Let go of the past. Let go of the future. In the present, let go." End quote. Let's end emotional distress.